So we
Hi,
are here
Jacob.
with Rachel Johnson, who is a candidate for Change UK in the upcoming European elections.
Thank you for getting the name right.
Absolutely, we don't call them the independent group anymore. So Rachel, what are your policies as an MEP and what would you like to achieve for the South West?
That's mad. This is not a general election. We haven't developed our policies yet. We are going to produce a mandate, a brief mandate on Friday, but we hit the ground running about 3 weeks ago. I've come on board 2 weeks ago. Our main focus is to get out the Remain vote in the European parliamentary elections. Make sure people vote, if possible, for Change UK, or the Remain party of their choice. You know, we are being collaborative about this, and to make sure that the Remain resistance has a really strong showing on May the 23rd.
Couldn't give us a hint of what's in that mandate on Friday, could you?
Nope.
No? Okay. Now, you were previously a member of both the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, as well as being an independent twice. What motivated you to leave both those parties?
I was fed up with the Tories. I felt that the Tory party was all about the Tory party and not much about the country. I left the Lib Dems because I was worried they weren't cutting through on the issue that I care about most, which is Brexit. And they didn't do very well in the general election. I think that were they going to be the party that was going to save us from a hard Brexit or no deal or the resurgence of the far right, they would have proved it to us in the 3 years that have elapsed since the referendum. They did a great job in the local elections. They got a fantastic ground game. I congratulate them for their work and I'm so pleased they've been rewarded for it. I felt it was time for me to make a change and I did. I hadn't been involved in the Lib Dems, I might add. I hadn't done any campaigning for them. I hadn't stood for anything for them. I'd merely joined the Lib Dems as a protest against the referendum result, as they at that time were the only party that had a second referendum or a people's vote as their primary EU policy. And for that reason, I joined them. And as I did so, I said, I'm doing this for now. I did two and a half years, and then I quietly left, which meant I was independent and free to make another commitment if something came along, and Change UK did.
What is it that Change UK can offer young voters in this country which other parties can't?
Change UK is really determined to do politics in a different way. It's non-tribal, it's not ideological, it's not riven by its extremist wings. It's a party which is going to develop its policies on the basis of facts, not on the basis of tribal interest or on donors' wishes. A lot of development is done because you've got big businessmen or women giving a lot of money to parties in order that the parties do what they want. I think Change UK is going to do things differently.
I just want to touch on the results of the local elections and the success of the Lib Dems, the quite marked success of the Lib Dems in those elections. Are you worried at all that under the proportional representation system in these EU elections, that the Lib Dems and Change UK will split the Remain vote and perhaps allow for an ascendancy of someone like the Brexit Party?
Well, that is the worry, and I think that is the reality. And unfortunately, there wasn't time, and it wasn't possible via electoral law to do anything in the elections on the 23rd of May to combine forces to make a Remain slate that people could vote for, which would incorporate the Greens, the Lib Dems and Change UK. That is going to be different in elections going forward, which aren't done on the D'Hondt system of PR, which is particularly kind of precise. You have one vote which you can cast for one party. So I quite see that somebody who's a centrist, Remainer, liberal, will be faced with the ballot box, at the ballot paper will think, for which Remain party do I cast my vote? Well, all I would say to that is we're the new guys on the block. We've got, I hope, some momentum behind us, and the people who are leading the party have risked everything to make this happen. And they're determined that they're in this for the long game. It's not just for the European elections. Going forward, I think we will see more of a strategic decisions taken between the parties if they get on, and to decide whether candidates should be stood down or stood up in order to maximise the Remain vote. When, Europe is the biggest issue on the agenda. At the moment, Brexit blots out the horizon, so that's the main focus.
Are you worried at all that...
Every question begins, am I worried? The answer is yes.
Okay, well...
What am I now worried about?
You've spoken a little about the idea that Change UK are introducing a new form of politics away from a tribalism. Don't you think that by simply creating, instead of a party divide, a Remain-Leave divide, you're simply introducing a new form of tribalism between Brexit Party and Change UK?
I don't think we're introducing it. I think the country is completely split between Leave and Remain. It is a much more of a fault line in politics now than between left and right, as you see from the slate of the Brexit Party, which has got former communist revolutionaries along with refugees from UKIP. So that we are simply reflecting the political chasm that the referendum has created down the middle of the country that threatens to actually rupture the United Kingdom, leaving Scotland independent and Ireland united. And so we believe that this is so important, we're so patriotic, we so believe in the United Kingdom, that we do not want to sacrifice it on the altar of the will of the people as expressed almost 3 years ago, which may not even reflect the will of the people now, if you look at polling. Up to 60% of the polled, in samples, say that if no deal, a Theresa May's deal and Remain was on the ballot paper, 65% were picked to stay as we are.
Well, we are in Cornwall, which voted to narrowly leave.
56%.
Yes, and the South West was something similar. Can you genuinely promise to represent the interests of people in the South West while you're trying to prevent what they voted for?
That's a good question. I think politicians have to try and represent all their constituents. And what I found interesting about campaigning in the South West is hearing why people voted Leave. But what has made me worried has been their assumption that the promises made are going to come good. Their assumption that something will turn up to replace the cap subsidies, that something will come up to replace the many tens of millions of cash that have been spent by the EU on this region. And it worries me that the very people who voted Leave are the ones who are going to be most cheated by Brexit.
So Change UK are in favour of a second referendum then?
You bet we are. Well spotted.
Well, on the subject of that second referendum, seeing as it seems most of the gridlock in Parliament, and based on the fact that people voted to leave in 2016, 80% of the population voted for parties who supported leaving in the 2017 general election. Yeah,
which goes back to my point about if the Lib Dems were going to do so well, why didn't they do better then?
But if people have voted for Leave and then Leave supporting parties, then surely the debate is over how we leave and not whether. So what do you think of the idea of a second referendum, putting it back to the people, but rather than using it as a mechanism using it as a mechanism to solve the crisis and allow people a choice on the various Brexit options?
I agree. Well, that could be. I mean, I don't know, one, whether we're going to get another vote, two, what would be on the ballot paper. Philosophically, you're right, in the sense that both manifestos of Labour and Tory were committed to respecting the referendum result. But that was following on a promise made in 2016 and on the leaflet. Admittedly, the referendum result was advisory. It then became law, as soon as Article 50 was triggered. We are on the road to an independent coastal state, as Theresa May puts it. Having said that, Sarah Wollaston, who is one of the Change UK MPs, puts this, who is a GP, expresses the situation, I think, in a very good way, which is like this. You've been told you need to have an operation. You decide you're going to go through with the operation. As the date approaches, it becomes clear that the doctor's not available, theatre's not available, the instruments are blunt, and then you're told you actually don't need the operation. But because the operation's been booked and it's in the diary, you go through with it anyway. She sees it, and I see it, as a self-defeating sequence of actions taken that this country takes, simply because in 2016, even when the leavers like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Dominic Cumming were all saying, don't tell them how we're going to leave, we're just going to leave and then we'll figure it out. Well, 3 years later, they haven't figured it out. The reason they haven't figured it out is because Brexit can't mean Brexit. We have an insoluble problem with Ireland and the hard border. We cannot have a hard Brexit without a hard border. That contravenes the Good Friday Agreement. It risks peace in Ireland. Nothing about it makes sense. It's time, given the problems that have emerged, it's only correct, moral and democratic to offer the people an opportunity to reflect on that choice, to really think whether they want to go through with it.
Well, David Cameron stood up in the House of Commons in 2016, I believe, just before the referendum, and said words to the effect of, we go to vote in June and this is the final deciding referendum on this. This is the last vote. Do you think he was misleading the House on that occasion?
I don't know why we have to ask that question now. It's like so historic. What David Cameron said on his hind legs in the Commons is neither here nor there. To coin a phrase, we are where we are. And faced with a hard Brexit, which is going to make the financial crash look like a picnic. And
is that entirely true? I mean, the Bank of England put out
Bank of England have done a couple of reports,
They've done a couple of reports, and their most recent one seemed to slightly contradict their previous ones and what Mark Carney had been saying it wouldn't actually be the financial catastrophe that everyone said it would be. We would be worse off, but it won't be anywhere near like the financial crash.
You'll definitely see.
True.
I know that they have done a bit of revision on their previous sort of, it's going to cost 40 billion a year to leave the EU, and a no deal Brexit, they haven't changed the prediction on that. It's 8% fall in GDP year on year, and that is on the scale of the financial crash. I mean, I think what you will see is if we have a low tax, low regulation economy, of course it's going to attract inward investment again, because people will, it'll be more profitable for people to do business here when, let's say, we don't adhere to trading standards, employment standards, environmental standards, and all those things. Yeah, we become a Singapore, sure, we could do well. But is that the country you want?
Well, we'll leave that up to the voters. Rachel Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you.